Welcome back to my kitchen. I'm Chef Deborah, and for this episode we're going to be making two different types of baklava. If you've never had baklava, it's a wonderful Greek dessert that's actually very simple to make, even though a lot of people think it's extremely complicated. So we're going to be making the traditional walnut pistachio cinnamon baklava, and then we're going to do a chocolate chip baklava as well, because we're chocoholics and we have to have chocolate in just about everything. So anyway, we're going to be doing these wonderful baklavas. We're going to be doing small 8x8 square pans. And for this recipe, you need 1 pound of melted butter. If you're only making one pan, you'll probably only need a ½ pound of butter. Baklava does use a lot of butter. So, and also, we don't make phyllo dough from scratch. It's too complicated. It takes hours to do. Let the professionals do it. So you can purchase this phyllo dough from Athens phyllo dough in the grocery store. I think just about every grocery store carries it, and it comes with 2 tubes of or 2 rolls of phyllo dough. Now, phyllo is like 1,000 leaves, I think is what they call it, similar to a croissant dough or a Danish dough. I just want to talk about the dough a little bit. It is very fragile. It's not hard to work with at all, but you want to unroll it very carefully because it is in a roll. And as you can see, this piece came off, but you can see it's paper thin, and you can see my hand through it. So it does tear easily like that. So you do have to be a little careful working with it, but I don't find it difficult to work with at all. So I usually unroll it like this in their sheets. Now, of course, in the bakery, we get the professional size, which is like 3 times this size that we're working with. You don't need that large of a phyllo dough for the home baker unless you're making a lot of baklava or spanakopita or some of the other. We're going to go ahead and get rid of that. We're not going to use that. So what I like to do is I like to keep a wet tea towel, not wet, damp, just to keep it covered so that it doesn't dry out. If it dries out, it will get brittle and just shatter in your hands. You don't want it to be too wet, so you just lightly dampen it and then wring it out till you can't get any more water out of it at all. And just keep it covered until you're ready to start assembling your baklava. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to lay 4 sheets of phyllo dough down inside the pan. And we might have to cut it, it looks like, because this is a square and this is an oblong. And so we're going to be buttering. I'm just trying to think, I'm thinking in my head here is where I'm trying to talk, if I need to get a different pan, but we'll work with this. So we just want to butter the pan, and then we're going to take 1 sheet as carefully as we can and separate it. And if it tears, you know, we're going to lay 4 on top of each other, and it's not a problem. Nobody's going to know like that tore. So we're just throw it down in the pan, and I don't know if you can see this or not. I'm trying to just press it down inside the pan like this. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect. Nobody's going to see that, and it won't affect the overall outcome of the dish either. So we're just going to lightly brush it with butter again. We're going to repeat this process. I'm finding that if a piece broke off, just use that piece. Don't waste any of it, because this isn't a cheap dish to make by any means. So because of the phyllo dough and the walnuts and everything that goes into it. So we're just going to repeat this layer. Butter. We don't want it swimming in butter. We just want a nice coating of butter on it, and make sure you get down into the corner like so you can kind of push it down into the corner. And there isn't a lot of ingredients to this either. I've got, what I did was grind or finely chop about a cup of walnuts and about a ½ cup of pistachios. I put in about a cup of brown sugar or white sugar if that's what you prefer to use. About 2 tablespoons of cinnamon. And I ground it up in my food processor together, and that's what this mixture is here. And this is what we're going to use in the nut version. So this is our 4th layer of phyllo dough. Okay, I've watched some Greek bakeries make phyllo dough. It is absolutely crazy hard to make. It's amazing. If you've never watched it, go on YouTube and watch, see if you can find a video of someone making phyllo dough from scratch. So I'm very grateful that commercial companies do that for us so we don't have to worry about it. So what we're going to do now, after the fourth layer is done, we're just going to take and we're going to lightly sprinkle our nut and sugar cinnamon mixture on top. And you don't have to do a lot because we're going to be layering. This is what it should look like. So we're going to be layering more. So we're going to set that aside, and then I like to just take a little bit off of our pastry brush and drizzle some butter on top just to dampen the nuts a little bit, because I found over the years that I've been making it, if I don't do that, the phyllo dough that we start stacking just kind of slides off the nuts because it doesn't have anything to stick to. So I started drizzling a little bit of butter, and it works great. This is not hard to do. It is a little bit time consuming. So it probably, I think, if you're making a pan this size, it really doesn't matter what size pan you make. It's all going to be the same process. It'll take about 20 minutes or so from beginning to end. So it's not that difficult. Kind of like making a batch of cookies. Except you don't need a mixer. So after, we're going to lay 2 layers down. So we have 4 layers of buttered phyllo dough, then sprinkled with our nut mixture. Then we're going to layer 2 more sheets of phyllo dough down, and then we'll sprinkle it again, not cinnamon sugar mixture. And then we're going to go 2 more layers and then top it again. So here, sprinkle more, and then we're going to drizzle with some butter. This is a lot of butter in this, in these recipes, but butter what makes it good. Julia Child used to say she loved her butter, and she was one of my very first female chefs that was ever on TV years and years ago, and I used to watch her as a girl, and now I'm watching her reruns, one of the networks, and I really enjoy. She's got her baking show and her cooking show, but she loved her butter. You can't hardly bake anything without the butter anyway, so. And then we're going to top it with more nuts. So you can make 4 to 6 layers if you want. Usually I do 4 layers, only because if you get too many more layers, it's going to be difficult to stay together once it's baked. Once you start cutting it, it'll just kind of fall apart. So you don't want that. There's nothing exciting about making baklava as far as, you know, having a special techniques or anything, you know, that you need to go to pastry school to learn how to make. There's nothing like that. Nothing like that at all. It's just a simple process of buttering and layering and buttering and layering. And this is another recipe that would be great for the kids to help you with. You know, the butter you can melt. It's not hot. You can stick your finger in it. They won't get burned. And if they make a little bit of mess with the butter, it's easily wiped up. So now on the top layer, we're going to go ahead and layer 4 sheets on top, just like we did on the bottom, so that we have a good base and a good top. So this would be our second sheet. That way it'll stay together nicely. Otherwise, if you just have 2 on top, it would be okay, but it wouldn't hold together as well. So we want it to hold together. This will be our third sheet. Now, if you want to add 6, you can as well. I have found, you know, for the bakery use and for our customers' preference, that 4 on top was more than enough. And if you don't use all the phyllo dough, you can just rewrap it and make sure it's sealed with, you know, plastic wrap and in a Ziploc bag, and stick it back in the refrigerator or stick it back in the freezer. It can be refrozen, so it's really a nice product to have in your kitchen. So once we get our last layer on, we're actually going to cut the baklava before we pour syrup on, before we bake it too. So what I like to do is try and get a whole piece on top so that it will present nicely. If you don't want to do the baklava in a pan like this, you can roll it up like a pinwheel if you want. Let me show you. I hadn't planned on doing that, but let me show you that technique real quick, in case you don't want to do it like this. It'd be another option for you. So we're going to go ahead and we'll butter the phyllo dough, and we're going to pretend that this is layered like we did before. So you can take a little bit of the nut mixture, let me start from this end, and you can roll it like this, and you have these little rolls, and you can place these side by side in a baking dish, and that way you don't have to cut. So this is another unique way of doing the baklava, and then that way you can just take little tongs and put it on a service platter once it's baked and syruped and everything. So that's a nice little way to do it as well. So try that with your kids. They would love putting that together. So anyway, so we've got this, the nut mixture done. So let me grab a knife real quick, and we're going to score this. So you can cut it in squares or you can cut it in diamonds, but we do need to cut it before we bake it. Again, if you want to make them small. This is a very rich dessert, so a little bit goes a long way with this dessert. A little bit goes a long way. That's why if you ever order it in the store or see it in the stores, the pieces are not very big at all because it is sweet and it is rich. I remember the first time I made this for my mother. She had never had it before, and she loves nuts, walnuts of any kind, pecans, and that quickly became her new favorite. So anyway, so I cut this in squares. Again, you can cut it in diamonds. What you do is you just start and you cut it this way, and you do it diagonally down the pan, and then you turn it 90 degrees and do it diagonally that way, and that way you have little diamonds. But this is what we do. We're going to put this in a 350-degree oven for about 30 minutes. And while this is baking, we're going to go ahead and get the syrup going. So let me go ahead and put the chocolate chip together off camera for you. It's the same process. We're just layering it with chocolate chips and a little bit of brown sugar. The same way, you don't have to worry about missing anything, but we'll go ahead and put that together off camera and get these two into the oven, and then I'll be back and show you how to make the syrup and let that be cooking and reducing while the baklava is baking. So we'll be back in a few minutes. So the baklava is in the oven baking, and so while it's baking, we're going to go ahead and put our syrup together. So we've got, in our pan, we've got 1 cup of water. We're going to add 1 cup of sugar. And stir it up just to mix it up, and then we're going to add 1/2 cup of good honey. You don't want to get a cheap honey. You want to use something really good in this because you've got all that real good butter in the baklava. You've got all those wonderful nuts, so don't skimp on the honey. You want to use a light honey too. You do not want to use one of the darker sourwood honey like we have around here. It's got a really strong flavor to it, like a clover honey. That's what you want to use, so that it doesn't overpower the baklava, the nuts, and the delicate balance of the pastry that we've got in the oven. So we're just going to stir it up, and we've got set aside here a teaspoon of vanilla, and we're gonna use about grating the zest of about half an orange in this. This is a Sicilian baklava. You know, Sicily and Greece are real close together. In fact, when I did my DNA testing on Ancestry.com, I found out that I have a lot of Greek in me as well as Sicilian, so that was new. No one knew that. But anyway, this is very traditional, putting in orange, and I love the orange, and our customers have loved just the slight hint of orange zest in our baklava. But we'll add that after it's cooked down. So while the pastry is in the oven baking, we're going to go ahead and put this on the stove top over medium heat, and we're just going to let it simmer and just watch it and stir it every once in a while. And when it starts to thicken up a little bit, just pull it off the stove, the burner, and just let it sit. And when the baklava is done, we're going to pour this right over the baked pastry. So as soon as the pastry is done, we'll be back. So we're back with our baked baklava. So we have our traditional walnut pistachio that I cut into squares. And then we have our chocolate chip, which I cut into diamonds so you can see the different shapes. So we have our syrup that has been cooked down. As you can see, it's nice and thick, not too thick. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to add our vanilla. And the reason we don't add the vanilla at the beginning is because the boiling and the cooking and the reducing of the syrup will actually delete the taste of the vanilla, so it's kind of a waste. So we're just going to go ahead and zest part of this orange. We don't want to zest down too far. Oh, that smells wonderful. I love the smell of orange. Orange and chocolate and nuts, and it's a great dessert. And I'm using a fine microplaner. You don't want big chunks of orange zest in it, so this is a pretty fine one. Just going to tap some of that in there. So probably about a half of this orange will zest up. And you don't want to get down to the white pith. You just want to take the very skin off where it was, the very top layer of the skin, so you don't get into that white bitter pith underneath. Get all that out. Oh, that smells good. And so basically what we're just going to do is we're just going to divide this syrup up. We're going to pour it over the baklava like this. And what happens is that this pastry just soaks all that goodness up and just makes it absolutely wonderful. And you don't want to get too much syrup in it, so if you have a little bit left over, that's okay, because you don't want it to be soupy. You want it just enough so that the pastry can absorb it all. As you can see, you can still see it moving around a little bit in there. The chocolate is a little bit thinner, but we're just going to let this sit and cool completely before serving it, because if you bite into this now, it will actually burn your mouth. The syrup is extremely hot. It's been boiling, so you really do need to let this cool completely, and then you can go ahead and cut it again along the lines, just because when it bakes it kind of molds together and kind of fills in the space. So you just want to go ahead and score it again, and then you can plate it and handle it. And baklava can actually be frozen for up to a month. So you can make a big batch of it, and actually that's what I used to do for my mother, and what we used to do in the bakery. We'd make a large batch. Of course, it didn't last very long, but we were able to freeze it, and we froze individual pieces of it, so that if someone wanted to buy just one piece, they could. But you can certainly, freeze it like this in a pan, or once it's completely cooled, you can wrap it individually, or wrap it up just as a bunch, several pieces at a time. Put it in wrap it in plastic wrap, put it in a sealed plastic container, and stick it in the freezer. It will last in the refrigerator for actually quite a long time. So this is a great little dessert to have on hand if you want something that is a little bit different, but is really, really nice. So once these are cooled, we'll come back and we'll cut them again and plate them, and we'll try some, and you can share with your family. So we'll see you shortly. So we're back with our cooled baklava. The syrup's been poured over it, and it looks delicious and it smells delicious. So we're going to go ahead. I've already cut along the lines. As you can see here, one square and one triangle. So the chocolate is the triangle. The squares are walnut and pistachio. So we're going to go ahead. I've got a platter here, and I'm going to go ahead and serve it up. And if you can hear the crunch already, the phyllo dough is just wonderful. And as I say, the first piece is always the hardest to get out. This is with already cutting through. But as you can see, many layers that's in here. It's just a wonderful little dessert. And again, this is one of those desserts that you don't need a lot of. A little bite goes a long way, just because it's rich in butter and honey, and just the flavors is just really phenomenal. So the diamond shape has got a little bit different look to it, just because it's a different shape, but it's a great way to separate the different flavors that you might want to make your baklava into. I never made baklava in anything other than like a chocolate or the walnut and pistachio. You can do just plain walnuts or just plain pistachios if you want to. This is your dessert, so you can be as creative as you want to with it. Even though it's a very traditional Greek dessert, it's nice that we can make it our own. And so if your family has a particular way that they like it, or they want to try it, go for it, because it's your dessert. So this is our traditional baklava, our nut baklava, and our chocolate baklava. And as you can see here, I'm just going to break a piece in half. You can see this is what it looks like inside, and it's just dripping with goodness. And if we let it sit overnight, all of this liquid will absorb the sweet syrup, but you get a little bit of the chocolate, a little bit of the sugar in there, and it's just really, really a nice little dessert. So this is Chef Deborah with our baklava 2 ways today from Rocca's Bakery in Greensboro, North Carolina. Signing off until next time.